Welcome to the Awesemo MMA strategy show for UFC 266, which goes down on Saturday night in Las Vegas in front of fans. And, well, gotta note this. It's the big cage on Saturday night, not the small cage that we're used to having in the UFC Apex. Of course, myself and Pete Rogers, we're going to break this one down for you over the next hour. Breakdown every fight. We'll give some picks. We'll give some prop bets that we like out there and so much more. Of course, our presenting sponsor is Monkey Knife Fight. We'll talk about Monkey Knife Fight a little later on in the show. Also, do want to let you know the show is also brought to you by our brand new sports betting podcast, Betting You, which is hosted by Ben and Matt. They get you covered for all things college football betting. So be sure to check out Betting You on your favorite podcasting platform. Of course, you can go over to awesemo.com to check out that podcast. And, well, while you're there, hit that 5-star rating review on the Awesemo MMA strategy show. As myself and Pete always appreciate that. Of course, as always, I'm joined by the fighter, Pete Rogers Jr. Pete, we got a pay-per-view. And look, I don't say this all the time, Pete. I'm genuinely excited for Saturday's card.
Yeah, it's an exciting card. I will say that there's a lot of big names, but I feel like it's a lot of tricky spots, and you're going to have to be very, very selective so that you don't end up, spoiling your parlays or spoiling your lineups, because I feel like despite the big names and despite some good paths to victory, I mean, we have a ton of question marks surrounding a ton of fighters on this card. And, you talk about cardio, you talk about inactivity. We also have some debuting fighters in the UFC. So, I mean, it's just a mixed bag. But all in all, should be a good night of fights, and I can't wait to see it.
I mean, look, I think there's a boom-bust fight on this card. I don't think it's hard to figure out what the boom-bust fight is. I think you probably know what it is, because I don't know how much you trust either side of the equation in the fight. Mm-hmm. And that's the heavyweight matchup of Curtis Blaydes and Jairzinho Rozenstruik. There's a fight that I don't know how to break down in Nick Diaz and Robbie Lawler, because on one side of the equation, the guy hasn't fought in 6+ years and hasn't won since 2011. So, man, there's so many questions with this card. We got a ton of fights to break down. So let's get right into it. Main event, Alexander Volkanovski taking on Brian Ortega. Volk, the defending champion here, 8,600 over on DraftKings, 7,600 for T-City in this one. Of course, it was just 2 fights ago that Brian Ortega got absolutely schooled by Max Holloway, comes back at the end of last year, and, man, it just looked absolutely tremendous against the Korean Zombie. This fight was supposed to take place earlier this year. Fight ends up getting canceled as Volkanovski went through a bad case of COVID that he documented on his YouTube channel. If you haven't seen that video from earlier this year, I highly recommend checking out. Really kind of fascinating to see everything that he went through in terms of battling COVID here. And this is, you think of Volkanovski, man, you would think because of his height, he'd have a reach disadvantage this one. He actually has a reach advantage of 2 inches in this fight. Kind of sticks out to you a little bit. Volume puncher. Brian Ortega, we saw vast improvements in his striking ability, but for a long time, the knock that's always been on Brian Ortega, very hittable and gets down early.
Yeah, he's constantly trying to dig himself out of a hole. And if he does that against Volkanovski, I feel like he could run out of time in a way, because Volkanovski's really good at banking rounds. And what he does Volkanovski combines good striking, good wrestling, high fight IQ. And I think the fight IQ is something that separates himself from the pack, honestly. We have seen Brian Ortega look excellent in his previous performance over Chan Sung Jung, where he ended up, upping the volume. Traditionally, he has a decent volume, but he really showcased some advancements in his striking. And I think he'll need to do so in this fight against Alexander Volkanovski. Now, I do think on paper, if you look at the volume, Volkanovski has the clear advantage with volume. 6.02 strikes landed per minute, absorbs 3.31. Brian Ortega on the other side, which is somewhat skewed from some of the wars that he's had, 4.29 strikes output, 6.28 strikes absorbed. So at times he is extremely hittable. I do think that Volkanovski can destroy that front leg of Brian Ortega, but I was impressed with Ortega's boxing at the last fight. So I think they're both going to have moments in this fight, and Volkanovski's not going to be able to really get takedowns as he normally can in a safe manner. I think he's going to have to be very, very selective when he does that, because you don't want to, get caught in a guillotine choke or one of Brian Ortega's triangles. He needs to, if he gets Ortega down, he needs to be careful with his ground and pound as well. So it's tough to really bet against Alexander Volkanovski, but I'll tell you what, I think this fight's going to be extremely close.
Yeah, I want to sprinkle some Ortega in there. Let me do a little true false with you, Pete. True
Okay.
false. Brian Ortega will pull guard at some point.
I'm,
Volkanovski has great takedown defense. So I think Ortega being able to get this fight to the ground is going to be tough. One of my thoughts is, and man, there's a big part of me that wants to pick Brian Ortega to win an upset here. I think the additional time for this fight benefited Brian Ortega more than it benefited Alexander Volkanovski. But one thing is, I do believe that Ortega is going to have to take chances where I don't think Volkanovski is going to have to take those same type of chances.
yeah, I mean, I think that the path to beating Volkanovski is there. You just have to do a little bit more than what Max Holloway has done in some of his fights. I mean, the rounds were very, very close in those situations. Um, the value on both of these fighters is something that I will prioritize for this slate. I do think that the main event is excellent, 8,600, 7,600 respectively, 5 rounds to work with. Ortega is going to be one of the underdogs that I'm sprinkling in plenty of lineups. But I will say, as far as a cash play, if you want to think that, you want a safer play, Volkanovski at 8,600 right in the mid range is probably something to put in your lineups first. But again, I'm torn on this fight, Jason. Honestly, I do think that Ortega has the skills to end up pulling off this upset. It's just I have some question marks surrounding both fighters, right? Like Volkanovski suffered from COVID, and we do understand, like even me, like I've had COVID. Like back early in the beginning, it took me a very long time to get back to my cardio, like where my cardio used to be. And despite me training throughout, the quarantine and all this and that, it felt like I never reached my same cardio peak that I had before. So I hope that Volkanovski is really not having any lingering effects from COVID, but I'm still going to side with him in the matchup.
Couple of interesting prop bets that stuck out to me on this matchup. Volkanovski wins via decision, plus 150. But here's a juicy one for you. Brian Ortega wins by TKO KO, plus 650.
That would
juicy.
Surprise me. It is. It would surprise me. I do think that both fighters are a little hittable at times. I think this is going to go the distance, truthfully. I think they're both tough. I think they're going to have to weather the storm from each other, have to get out of some bad situations. How does Volkanovski look off of his back? We'll have to see. I understand that he has solid takedown defense, but in a scramble or in a front headlock position, all you need is Ortega to spin around and take you back. And, now we're talking about a phenomenal Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner in an advantageous spot. So I would definitely consider Ortega. He's in my underdog pool for sure, but I am still leaning Volkanovski.
Of course, this is the Also MMA Strategy Show right here at Awesemo.com. If you're not subscribed to Awesemo right here on YouTube, be sure to do that. Got a ton of great shows for you each and every day. We got you covered the rest of the day for MLB coverage, also for tonight's NFL Thursday night game with the Panthers and the Texans. And of course, if you're not also a Plus member and you want to get a little peek about what's behind the paywall, today's free premium data and tools is NFL Showdown / single game ownership projections and also MLB top stacks. So if you've been thinking about becoming a member of Awesemo Plus, you want to get a little peek about what's behind the paywall, check out that free premium content data and tools over at Awesemo.com today. Co-main event, Valentina Shevchenko, the 15-1 betting favorite in this one. 9,500 over on DraftKings, takes on Lauren Murphy, 6,700. Pete, I did a dummy crunch a little before the show today.
Oh boy.
How much Lauren Murphy you think came up? The dummy crunch was 150 lineups.
I'll say 2%. 1%.
I didn't even uncheck her. Zero.
Oof. I mean, let's be real. Valentina Shevchenko is one of the most special athletes we've seen in the octagon for sure. And she's heavily favored in this matchup, and for good reason. I still think that it's going to be business as usual. Shevchenko is going to go out there, outclass her in all facets of the game, en route to a dominant performance. It's just whether or not she gets her out of there. So that's the conversation, right? Like, is she going to be able to pay off that 9,500 price tag in comparison to some of these other 9,000 options? The upside is definitely there, right? Like, if Lauren Murphy's a little too tough for her own good, we could see an elevated score from Shevchenko because she's going to have to work more. I'm still putting Shevchenko in plenty of lineups, and I will uncheck Lauren Murphy, to be honest.
Lauren Murphy has never been finished in her career. She's durable. I think that's one word that people will say about her. But like, I've been thinking the past couple of days of like, okay, how does she get this done? How does she shock Shevchenko, and outside of just, a punch that maybe, Shevchenko's unbalanced? I mean, I think in terms of DFS, I think the question you have to play there, and I'll say this, I don't think I'd mind Shevchenko over on FanDuel at $23 because I do think Murphy is going to try to get takedowns. But, is Shevchenko is like, how many points do you need for her to be optimal at that price tag on DraftKings?
Yeah, I'd probably say 110 easy. But I think it's clearly there for her. I think she has tremendous upside given her skills in all areas. It's not like she's a one-dimensional fighter at all. I think Lauren Murphy can look at that Jennifer Maia fight where Shevchenko looked somewhat human for a moment, and she was able to get, a takedown in top position over Shevchenko, and we're like, oh man, maybe Jennifer Maia is the real deal. But styles make fights, and I don't really think that Lauren Murphy can go in there and do that same sort of thing. But it's something to take into consideration in a training camp, especially if the coaches are sitting there trying to develop a game plan. All right, hey, let's go in there. Let's clinch up with her. Let's put her against the cage. Let's, somewhat nullify that striking by being inside that phone booth with her, weigh on her a little bit, hopefully tax her, and then possibly take her down. But it's going to be tough sledding, and I foresee Shevchenko going out there. If she loses a round to Lauren Murphy, I'll be surprised. I think it's going to be at least 4 dominant rounds and possibly a finish.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're thinking this thing's going to go 25 minutes, maybe you're just hoping a bunch of takedowns potentially happens this one. And of course, one of the things about this fight card is it's 3 5-round fights because the matchup between Nick Diaz and Robbie Lawler is a 5-round fight. It is now a middleweight matchup at 185 pounds, 7,900 for Nick Diaz, 8,300 for Robbie Lawler. Look, I don't know what to make of Nick Diaz. And like there was a question earlier on in the chat that I'll bring up here, which was in relation to the interview that Nick Diaz gave ESPN's Brett Okamoto. From Matt, he says, what do we think about Nick Diaz saying he doesn't want to fight, playing possum? Look, I don't know what to make of Nick Diaz. When before the interview came out, I saw the picture of him doing the photos that they do for promo aspects, whatnot. And my first thought was like, ooh, Nick doesn't look in as good a shape as we've typically seen Nick in. And I don't know what to make of Nick Diaz heading into this one. I mean, it's the guy that interview says that, he believes he can be beat. He should be fighting Kamaru Usman. Like, Pete, what do you make of this? You're the fighter here. What do you make of this?
I will say that this is a matchup with question marks surrounding both sides, right? Like Robbie Lawler hasn't looked the best, but at least he's been in there with UFC competition, while Nick Diaz has somewhat been struggling on the outside of the cage, dealing with some alcohol issues, personal issues, not being in love with the sport anymore for a little bit, and looking to come back. Why is he coming back? He says that this matchup doesn't really make sense, so it's not like the matchup really enticed him to come back. It's most likely a financial reason. But in addition to that, I do think that he's seeing it's tough as a competitor, right? When you're seeing people in your weight class perform and you know that you can beat them, it's hard to stay on the sidelines. I will say that Nick Diaz's body does look a little different, and it could be because he's just older now. But a couple weeks ago, it might have been a couple months ago, he looked to be pretty shredded, and I sent you the photo. And now he's not as shredded, so he could be masking an injury. He could have fallen ill throughout camp. He could have taken his foot off the gas pedal. He could have felt burnt out. He could have had a bad weight cut, and I think he just didn't want to cut weight, and the fight at 185 just made a ton of sense for him. If this was years ago, I would be favoring Nick Diaz, right? Like I favor the pace, I favor the volume. Robbie Lawler's a tremendous round 1 and round 2 athlete, where he can really put together great combinations and get people out of there. But we have seen Robbie Lawler get bullied at times, press against the cage, fall behind on the scorecards. And I do think that pace can break people, especially when fighters take rounds off. And I have to favor the pace of Nick Diaz. And this is a total guess, right? This fight, you probably should look at other fights from a betting perspective. But for DFS, you're going to need exposure to this fight, because if Robbie Lawler goes out there and touches Nick Diaz, he could possibly work towards a stoppage. But throughout Nick Diaz's career, he's been somewhat durable. And that pace and cardio is always in his back pocket. That I think is going to be the difference maker here, despite the the lack of time in the cage.
And Nick has always been known as a volume puncher, but in his last 2 fights against Anderson Silva and George St. Pierre, we did not see that out of him. So I think that's something to pay attention to. The question that got asked by Nick says, so does being a 5-round make Diaz or Lawler must plays? I don't think this is a must play because I don't know how you can have a ton of confidence in either guy at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they could go out there and be a little hesitant and gun shy because they don't want to get into too many exchanges. I also think that Nick Diaz plays around a little bit, so you have to take his antics into consideration too, right? As far as DFS, like he's an underdog, and because of his price, I think that I'm going to have a ton of Nick Diaz at 7,900. I think his floor is somewhat high because of the volume. If he goes out there and even works towards taking Robbie Lawler down, that is definitely a path to victory. And he has some phenomenal Brazilian jiu-jitsu as well. So with all that being said, I'm still favoring Nick Diaz in the matchup, but this is a very, very tricky fight and something that could definitely spoil your parlays.
It's going to be very interesting to see what his ownership ends up being on Saturday, because obviously, Nick and the Diaz brothers are two of the most popular guys in this sport. Of course, when you want to get access to all the great Awesemo Plus tools and content we have out there for nearly every DFS sport, you can sign up for an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95, gives you full access to all the premium content and tools we have over awesemo.com. And if you're a new user of Awesemo Plus Platinum, then you can take advantage of the promo code we have for this show. That promo code is MMA Strategy Show, all caps, one word. That's MMA Strategy Show for 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And if you're just looking for an Awesemo Plus MMA weekly package, they start as low as $295. Of course, one of the things, and especially you're a premium member, at Top Fighter Tool, that is the one piece of spreadsheet we have over there at awesemo.com. That is a go-to for me to kind of look at everything. Look at that top 6%. That's one of those percentages I like to look at. Also, where can you find that leverage play? That's always something we're talking about here. Now, we talked about the ultimate boom bust fight on this card. To me, it's this one. Curtis Blaydes, Jairzo Rozenstruik. I mean, look, Curtis Blaydes, if he goes out there and can get the takedowns, he's got a chance to get a massive score. But when we have seen Curtis Blaydes against the biggest power punchers in this division, Francis Ngannou, Derek Lewis, we know what's happened.
Yeah, man, this is a very, very tough fight to pick. And I think you have to be very careful. This comes down to exposure for me and kind of what piece fits for the rest of your lineups. I will be targeting Jairzinho Rozenstruik heavily because I really can't trust the chin of Curtis Blaydes to this point. There are some times when you get knocked out, it seems like, every single time after that, it's so much easier to wobble you or take you out of there. And Jairzinho Rozenstruik, I don't really think is like a phenomenal fighter for this division, but the one thing that he has going for him is crazy, crazy power. His volume is lackluster, which if he's fallen behind on the scorecards, he could easily lose a decision to Curtis Blaydes. And I do think that Curtis Blaydes in a vacuum is a better fighter than Jairzinho Rozenstruik, right? Like Curtis Blaydes checks more boxes and probably should win this fight. But the better fighter doesn't always win, Jason. And if I want to look at something, it's Jairzinho Rozenstruik's stats against Cyril Gane, which kind of was a little interesting to me. Obviously, I've seen these fights, but when I look at things on paper, it puts things into perspective. Cyril Gane went 2 of 14 for takedowns against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Obviously, a phenomenal athlete, not the same level of wrestler that Curtis Blaydes is. If we look at Alistair Overeem went 2 of 10 against Rozenstruik. Junior Albini went 2 of 6. So he's going to get taken down, right? He's going to get taken down, but is it going to be enough? Is he going to be able to keep him down? Because Curtis Blaydes, like on the mat, if he implemented heavy ground and pound all the time, but I wish he implemented submissions because I think that he could end up submitting a ton of opponents. He doesn't do it, bro. He does not do it at all. And that's why, like, for me, the safe play is obviously Curtis Blaydes, but I'm actually picking Jairzinho Rozenstruik to touch that chin and get him out of there.
I'm glad you brought that up because every time I watch a Curtis Blaydes fight and he gets into the ground, I'm like, dude, do you not know jiu-jitsu? Like, there has been times where, like, he's on the guy's back and I'm like, he's giving you the neck. Just take it. Yeah. And I'm just like, yeah, I mean, outside of the concerns with the chin, my second biggest concern with Curtis Blaydes is if Rozenstruik is offering up a rear naked choke, I don't think he'll take it.
Right. And I think like it's not a lack of finishing ability because Curtis Blaydes has gone in there and finished tons of fighters on the feet and all that, but he's not going to do that against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. He's going to look to take him down, and I think he's going to look to employ the same game plan he used against Alexander Volkov. The issue is Volkov is not a notorious finisher, whereas Jairzinho is. So when Volkov was able to get back to his feet of those 14 takedowns, I mean, let's look at the stats right here. Curtis Blaydes went 14 of 25 for takedowns. So that is just DFS points galore, right? But if Jairzinho works back to his feet, throws a combination in an exchange, I really do think he's going to knock out Curtis Blaydes.
Well, if you remember that fight Blaydes, it was a 5-round fight. It's not in the 4th round got there. He was extremely gassed. And that's one of the things that could be a live betting type situation with Rozenstruik. If he can survive the 10 minutes and maybe that gas tank's not there in the 3rd round there for Curtis Blaydes, I think in terms of prop bets, Blaydes plus 120 to win by TKO KO, Rozenstruik to win by TKO KO plus 375. I'd like that prop bet.
Yeah. This is a very, very tilting matchup, but you have to be very, very careful. It's volatile as it comes. So I'm going to have plenty of Curtis Blaydes. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to have plenty of Curtis Blaydes, but I also, from a live betting standpoint, I think this is a fight that you could definitely take advantage of, or you could look at prop bet and at Curtis Blaydes via decision or Jairzinho via KO TKO.
Rozenstruik over at FanDuel at $11 could be a very interesting play there as well. Maybe you're trying to get someone low with a potential rack up some points for takedown offense is something considered there. Well, you're talking about the FanDuel side of the equation. Our opening matchup of the pay-per-view will be a female matchup. Jessica Andrade taking on Cynthia Calvillo. Jessica Andrade, 9,000, 7,200 for Cynthia Calvillo. To me, the question is, can Cynthia Calvillo get this fight to the ground? I don't think she can.
I mean, I think she can, but I don't think that she's going to be able to do that throughout 15 minutes consistently, because I do think Jessica Andrade is so dangerous in all areas of the game. You're talking about an incredible striker who has phenomenal power. She has great takedowns herself and some pretty slick jiu-jitsu. Off her back, there's a path to beating her, but I really think that Cynthia Calvillo is going to be a little outgunned in this fight. I think the volume for Jessica Andrade, the physicality, everything really points in the Jessica Andrade, side for me. And I'm going to be heavily favoring her. It's just a matter of, does she pay off that price point at 9,000? I feel like I'm going to say no. I feel like I'm going to say no. I think she's going to win convincingly, but I feel like there's going to be some other fighters on this card that absolutely smash. And I think she'll just be solid.
Could be someone to pay attention to looking at those ownership throughout the week. Maybe see if it gets low enough where you go, you know what? Maybe I can get a little bit leverage on the field last week. And look, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. We talked about last week with Impa, where the ownership just wasn't there. It was like, hey, if you're looking for a leverage play, of course, we were on the Carlson Harris side in that one. But you always talk about that when you're looking at the ownership of, look at those fighters who are under 30%, under 20%, and especially in that 9,000, 89, 8,800 range, where maybe potentially you can find a little bit of value there. But I do like Jessica Andrade in that one. Then we got a bantamweight matchup between Marlon Moraes and Modafferi. Modafferi, 8,900, 7,300 for Marlon Moraes. Modafferi, it's a big step up in competition for him. Gas tank, it's there. It's 100 miles an hour at the start of the fight to the end of the fight. It's crazy. To me, it's all about, he just has to weather that early storm. If you tell me this fight makes it a second round, I want a ton of Modafferi because he's going to be going for takedowns. And I don't know if Marlon Moraes can keep up with that pace for 15 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Pace is like, is going to be an X factor for a lot of these matchups and what's really going to point me in one direction or another. And that's why I am siding with Dvalishvili. I understand that he's a very, very popular fighter and will come in as probably massive chalk on this slate because of his upside. I mean, his average is 111.5 fantasy points per fight. That is ridiculous. There was only one fight of his, and that was against John Dodson, where he scored 74. In the others, he scored over 100, 108 against Stamen, 148 against Lopez, 136 against Kennedy, and 124 against Katona, to name a few. I mean, you're talking about 5-2, 13, 12, 5 takedowns. That's ridiculous work rate. His pace can break people. We've seen Marlon Moraes break under a lot of high output in that, Henry Cejudo fight. And, I'll say it, fatigue makes cowards of us all. There's one thing that I will say, though, that Moraes is definitely live to upset Dvalishvili because he's there in front of him for a little bit. He tends to strike and get a little wild for my liking. And I think that he has a little too much confidence in his striking because he knows that he's a tough guy and he can take a shot. But I do think that Marlon Moraes is threatening with submissions. We've seen Dvalishvili get caught in a guillotine from Ricky Simon and get finished. That was a crazy finish. The one thing I'll say, right, like Marlon made the switch to American Top Team. And if I'm looking like, okay, well, they have studs everywhere. Who's a fighter that can really emulate an endless wrestling attack like Dvalishvili? And to me, it's Danny Sabatello. And Danny Sabatello is a guy who has phenomenal takedowns. And if you're starting to recognize that name, you're starting to see him take out people in Bellator, where he just looks like the Bellator version of Dvalishvili. And that's a sparring partner and a training partner that Marlon Moraes has really worked a lot with in this camp, according to his Instagram. So I do like that. If they could ever solve the gas tank issues of Marlon, I do think that you have a very, very live fighter at 7,300. Marlon's more of a sprinkle for me, but I am favoring Dvalishvili in the fight.
So Merab has had 8 fights in the UFC. He has gone to the 3rd round in every single one of them. And Pete, you kind of alluded to this number: 11, 6, 5, 5, 12, 13, 2, and 5. That's takedowns landed.
It's ridiculous.
If he can mimic what he did against a Gustavo Lopez, a Casey Kenny, or Frankie Science, it's a smash play.
Yeah, and it is crazy, though, because like you're saying those names, and now we're putting him against Marlon Moraes. Massive step up in competition because Marlon is very, very well-rounded. And if he can refine some of his mistakes in his previous camps and his previous fights, I definitely think that he could pull off the upset. There aren't too many underdogs on this card where I really think they have a legitimate shot. It's more of a lot of favorites that I am leaning towards, but Moraes will definitely be somebody I'll sprinkle in lineups.
And Merab is a guy that benefits from the latest scoring system for DraftKings. So let's just look at his last fight. He had 71 significant strikes landed, 178 total strikes, 5 takedowns, almost 2 minutes of control time. So, when we talk about the fighters that have benefited from this version of the DraftKings scoring system, Rob Dvalishvili is one of those guys. I will say this: I got my juicy Merab prop for this one.
Oh boy, what is it?
Rob wins round 3, 12-1.
Well, yeah. I mean, it could be round 2 as well, right? Like Moraes has like a significant drop off in his performance and his cardio, and it's like sudden. So I do like that, but Merab is more of a decision guy. But if you think that, the pace is just going to be too much, we could see Moraes get taken out of there for sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to look to see what is Marlon wins round 1.
That's probably
10-1. 10-1.
What?
Yeah. That's a juicy prop too.
Yeah, that's damn good. I like that better, to be honest. If Marlon's going to win, that's how it's going to happen.
Oh, totally. No doubt about it. I mean, I think that if you're a multi-entry player, you got to be sprinkling in Marlon Moraes. But I think you also have to understand there's a potential that he just gets taken down, and that it may be a situation that if this is a 15-minute fight, that if you do not have Merab in your lineup, you're not going to be optimal.
Yeah, and this is like where Fantasy Cruncher on Awesemo.com could really, come into handy, where you go in there and you look at the ownership and your exposure levels and you set exposure levels. Like, I want to get 10% of Marlon, because if you just leave Marlon, unchecked and you try to get to some of these high price fighters, naturally you're going to end up with a lot of Marlon. So you have to limit and temper your expectations.
Next up, we have got a matchup that I hope they make this a welterweight fight. And that's Dan Hooker and Nasrat Haqparast. They're both getting to Vegas today because of visa issues on both sides of the equation. Like, come on, UFC. Let's not make these guys be cutting weight to 8 o'clock in the morning. I think they're both landing like 11 o'clock tonight. So they're both going to go right in the weight cutting mode here. Dan Hooker, 8,700, Haqparast, 7,500. That's what scares me about this fight, Pete, is the fact of these guys have been dealing with visa issues. Nasrat did not know till yesterday that he was going to be able to, take this fight because of his visa issues. Dan Hooker had to go to social media to kind of help expedite his situation. Like, that's what scares me about this fight. I think Dan Hooker, there's a reason he's a favorite. I think in normal situations, yeah, Dan Hooker would be my pick. But I'm a little concerned based on the factors that have been going into fight week for both these guys.
I'll say, I just don't understand why they didn't book it for another card. Like, push it back a week. I mean, I understand that you want to get these guys on this card. I don't know, man. It just seems like it's a mess, and it is a mess, and it's going to be very difficult for both of these fighters to come in there in optimal shape and an optimal scenario, right? Like, this is a mind, because for both fighters, both fighters.
I don't know what you mean.
Yeah, right. But both fighters are going to have to deal with all this adversity and all these, X factors on the outside of the cage, like having to take long flights and then cut weight dramatically and quick. And it just seems so rushed that I think that, I don't know, the UFC isn't really doing them any favors by keeping it on this card. But I am favoring Dan Hooker in the bout. I think that he's such a well-rounded mixed martial artist, whereas Nasrat Haqparast, more of a boxing-oriented fighter, has looked good in moments. We've been high on him. He has incredible speed and some good pop for the division. But I look at Dan Hooker and I look at his legitimate resume and who he's fought up until this point, and that really just makes me side with Dan Hooker. I think that he has this very, very sneaky submission game that I think could come into play in this matchup if he hurts Nasrat Haqparast. I just like Dan Hooker everywhere in the matchup, and Nasrat, I think, is dealing with some family issues as well. I believe his mom passed away or something like that. So to me, it's just like such a headache, and I feel bad for both of these guys. But as far as DFS, I like Dan Hooker at 8,700.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing about Hooker is, and I think probably part of the reason why they didn't move it is because he's got that mandatory 14-day quarantine once he goes back to New Zealand. Like, could you imagine, Pete, if in, say, Connecticut, they said, hey, Pete, yeah, we know you're fighting in Nevada, but when you come back, you got to be quarantined in a hotel, away from your family, away from your huge dog at this point. Good Lord. What are you feeding Marty?
Marty's huge, bro. Marty's bigger than my girlfriend. I will say that, it would be weird, right? Like, I was in the bubble at Mohegan Sun for a week for my friend's fight, and that was an experience, and that was interesting, being by yourself. So props to Dan Hooker, and I believe he did that on Fight Island against Dustin Poirier, if I remember correctly, where he was, he had to quarantine for a while. I remember there was a photo of when he got back of him at a fence or the gate with his wife and his girl right there. Like, come on, man, this is crazy. But again, I'm still siding with Hooker, and I just think that Kai brings up a good point. He's like, I don't know about Haqparast, but Hooker is a crazy man. I don't think it'll affect him mentally. I do think that Hooker is just such a gamer. He's not going to be rattled by this at all.
Of course, we are sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight. With Monkey Knife Fight, you are in charge of their player prop-based contests. And if you are a new user, when you sign up over at Monkey Knife Fight, they have an instant first match deposit of up to $100 when you sign up with the promo code AWESOMO. And Pete, let's look at the main event and co-main event. Total strikes landed here. Volkanovski, 133.5. Brian Ortega, 95.5. If you think this is going 5 rounds, I don't think I can go less 133.5.
Yeah, I'm going to say more for both. I really am. I'm going to say more for both. I think that they're both going to beat the crap out of each other in certain moments. I think this is going to go into the later rounds because they are both so talented, and their skills will be somewhat negated. I think it's going to play out mostly on the feet. So I'm smashing more on both sides.
I'm with you on that one. I'm smashing less on the co-main event. Valentina Shevchenko, 95.5. Lauren Murphy, 56.5. Look, I don't think this thing's going 25 minutes. I don't know if this thing hits the championship rounds. It's double less for me on both of them.
What's Lauren Murphy's line again?
56.5.
I'm going to say more for both because I think she's going to have moments, and I think she will be competitive early, but she's going to have a significant drop off, and then Shevchenko is just going to dominate her. Dominate. I'm going to say more. I think it's just barely over the more.
All right. Here is what has happened here with Valentina Shevchenko. Jessica Andrade, 10 significant strikes landed. Maya, 36. Chukagian, 17. Carmouche, 18. Just Guy, we all know what happened there.
Yeah, right.
You have to go back to her matchup against Joanna Jędrzejczyk back at UFC 231, where Jędrzejczyk landed 78. She landed 124 total strikes. Of course, that was a 5-round fight.
Right. I'll say that it's not going to happen on the outside against Shevchenko. It's not. If you're in the middle of the cage, you're going to struggle hitting her that many times. If you can pin her against the cage, similar to how Jennifer Maia did, and get a lot of those strikes off in the clinch, it just comes down to what is considered significant and what is considered a total strike or insignificant strike. You have to see with that. Yeah, I will take the chance on the Moore side.
And the number on Shevchenko has gone up over the last hour since I did my spreadsheet here. It's now 98.5.
I still I think she's going to make her somewhat of a punching bag throughout, and I think Lauren Murphy's going to be a little too tough for her own good.
I think that probably tells you what's going on over there. Monkey Knife Fight, that people are hopping on that less on Valentina Shevchenko, which is very understandable now. Let's move on to the next matchup. We got a heavyweight matchup that was supposed to take place a little earlier this year. Chris Daukaus against Shamil Abdurakhimov, 8,800 for Chris Daukaus, 7,400 for Abdurakhimov. I think Chris Daukaus is probably going to be one of the more popular plays this week. I just don't know how Abdurakhimov is going to be able to keep up with the speed and precision that Chris Daukaus has.
Yeah, so I will say that Abdurakhimov is a dangerous fighter, and it's not going to be a walk in the park. What's helping Chris Daukaus will be his speed and his youth in this matchup, whereas Abdurahkimov's 40 years old now, has been away from the sport for a couple of years now. He's dangerous. He definitely is. He has some punching power, but his takedowns and his top pressure is what he really likes to turn to. That's the one question mark surrounding Chris Daukaus, right? Like, what is his wrestling like? How can he defend takedowns? We understand that he's going to be the better striker in this situation. He's going to have the faster hands, the crisper combinations. He probably has the better Brazilian jiu-jitsu as well, training with his brother and all those guys down there in Philly. I like him. I do like him a lot, and I think that he's a rising star for the division. I don't think the inactivity is really going to help Shamil, especially when you're coming in there against a red-hot prospect, so to speak. My one worry is if Daukaus is planted on his back and just loses time and doesn't have enough time to work with. So Chris Daukaus is going to be chalk, and I'm okay with getting there. I think on FanDuel, you could look at him as an interesting piece because I'm sure he's working on his takedown defense. And if he can keep this fight standing, he could pick apart his opponent and have a boosted score total over there on FanDuel.
And Ryan in the chat mentioned Daukaus as MVP on FanDuel. I like that one, especially at $19. I think that's that'd be a good play there. I love Chris Daukaus. I think that when you talk about what the UFC has done to add talent to this heavyweight division, Chris Daukaus is one of those young guys that they've been able to brought in. Next up, we got Roxanne Modafferi taking on Talia Santos. Talia Santos, 9,300. Roxanne Modafferi, 6,900. I know you're not a big believer in trends, Pete. I know you're not. There's a trend here.
Oh, what is it?
So we go back to 2017. Roxanne Modafferi loses to Nico Montagna in the final of the Ultimate Fighter. Comes back her next fight, wins against Barb Honcho.
Oh, no, I see where this is going.
So it's a win-loss situation. She's coming in off a loss. Now, look, she's never someone you want to challenge. The thing is, if you are going to take the chance of Roxanne Modafferi here, your thought is she's got to get takedowns. If you do not think that she can get the fight to the ground, I can't recommend playing her. But if you think she can take Talia Santos down, I don't mind it as a punt play.
Yeah, okay. So I've learned my lesson betting against Roxanne Modafferi in certain spots because she's really burned me, and she's come from behind more times than I can count. But I will say that, the UFC is putting her up against, legitimate talent, and I don't think that Taila Santos has the same Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu acumen that Modafferi has. But in saying that, Roxanne is a phenomenal BJJ practitioner, but she doesn't have that many submissions on her record. If you go back and you look, she uses takedowns to get into better positions to then implement good, ground and pound. If you look on her record, I think she has 4 or 5. I don't have it up in front of me right now, but I think she has 4 or 5 submissions in all of her experience in her 25 victories. Armbar from guard is definitely viable here, and we did see Taila Santos get caught in numerous armbars in a previous fight against Jillian Robertson. But to me, right, I think that Tyler Santos is going to win this in the clinch. I think she's the much stronger fighter. She can take down Roxanne because Roxanne's going to be trying to lace the leg and work towards some neat and interesting Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu takedowns by going for a double or inside reap or outside reaping that leg. I will say that Modafferi is definitely a live underdog if Tyler Santos gasses out. But for me, I think Tyler Santos will probably be the better striker of the two, despite Modafferi's volume. Tyler Santos will be the stronger and more physical of the two. And I just need her to win 2 rounds. I think she can do that. And as long as she doesn't make a silly mistake and allow Modafferi to capitalize with a submission, I think we're good. I think we're in the clear. So 9,300. I'd be really surprised if she was able to go out there and get rid of Modafferi because Modafferi is very, very durable at times. And that would be a tremendous feather in her cap. And she tends to lose decisions. If she goes out there and finishes Modafferi, we could be looking at a very, very serious contender. So I'll be a little underweight at 9,300, but I'm still getting exposure.
I like Santos more over on the FanDuel side of the equation because, she's going to have to stop takedowns. Now, if you did want to take Roxanne Modafferi to win via decision, plus 550.
I mean, yeah. And we got my buddy Aiden in the chat saying Roxy round 3 sub. I mean, that's exactly what I was worried about when I saw her, when I was going back and watching the film of her against Jillian Robertson. I'm like, oh man, Roxy's going to throw up an arm bar and submit her, or she's going to submit her somehow. And then I wanted to see how many submission wins Modafferi has. And it was kind of underwhelming for her skill set. I'm like, I would expect her to have a lot more. I really would. And then you bring up injury concerns that Modafferi has been recently, dealing with. So I just think Tyler Santos, I like her. I like her to win 2 rounds, not so much on DraftKings. It's not a smash play. I'll probably be level with the field or somewhat underweight.
Yeah. I want to say it was meniscus with her. I want to say
it was something. I know she had a knee injury. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say it was meniscus. I mean, look, if you're going to, say put Roxanne in 10% of your lineups, you're going to have to understand, she's not, you're not expecting her to win and get 100 points. If she wins, it's 60, 70 points.
Right. And at that price point allows you to pay up for other options. And as long as a lot of the underdogs don't smash value, you could be looking at a very, very sneaky fighter in Modafferi at 6,900.
Yeah. I mean, look, there are some fighters I want to have in my underdog pool. Roxanne Modafferi is not one of them. She's more of just, maybe I throw into her lineup and it allows me to spend up on some other fighters I really want to have in my lineup.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that, right? Like for me on Fantasy Cruncher, I create 2 things. I create an underdog pool where I'll have my exposure set a little bit higher. Then I'll also create a long shot pool where I have my exposure set a little bit lower, where I know that it's really a dart throw. And I think that I would put Modafferi in that long shot pool.
Next up, we got a fight that I think may be something we really have to consider. Maybe kind of a fight that probably is optimal. Uros Medic taking on Jalen Turner. 8,400 for Medic, 7,800, for Jalen Turner. This is one of those ones, Pete, I feel like this is a fight you have to circle, and I feel like we're going to have to get this one right to be optimal.
Yeah, I view this fight as going to be an optimal fight just based on the stylistic clash. Uros Medic, phenomenal striker out of King's MMA, formerly fighting on Alaska FC. Jalen Turner, 7,800, training over at Ruka, I believe. I've seen him spar Luke Rockhold, and I know that's a tremendous gap in weight, but that just goes to show you how massive Jalen Turner is. And I do think that he possesses some devastating skills for this division, and I think he'll be around for a while. So I do view this as 2 fighters that are somewhat on the way up. I'm surprised they paired him so early. I think that there's more stability in backing Jalen Turner because you have seen the full game out of him. We've seen him strike. We've seen him grapple. We've seen him go outside of round 1. Uros Medic looks like a phenomenal round 1 specimen, but there's just so many unknowns regarding him. In Jalen Turner's losses, he has been knocked out. So I am worried about that. And this is going to be, manipulating exposure. I'll have to wait for ownership because I want to see maybe I can get, an advantage over the field with one or the other, but I'll be smashing this fight. And truthfully, I don't really care who's in my lineup. I'm going to be siding with Jalen Turner.
They're both going popular.
Yeah. I mean, they should be, right?
But here's the other thing. And we've talked about this for, a long time now. It is tough to trust an Alaska FC fighter.
I mean, Alaska FC and Asian MMA for a while were like fades for a while. They're both starting to, Alaska FC ain't catching up at all, but Asian MMA is starting to catch up, and you are starting to see some well-rounded athletes, but Alaska FC is kind of, you fought where? Okay.
I don't know if did you remember a couple months ago, Alaska FC had a show that looked like it was in someone's backyard?
Yeah, bro. I mean, come on, man. Get me out there, bro. Get me out there.
Long flight, bro. Long flight.
Yeah, I'll pull the Dan Hooker. I'll go out there. I don't care. But yeah, man. I'm slightly siding with Jalen Turner, but I do really like Uros Medic. I like the camp he's around. I like the training partners he's with. From the Contender Series to his debut, he's looked phenomenal and hasn't really given me any reason to pick against them. It's just, if I look at where he's from and I look at how everything's so early, what happens if this fight gets dragged out? And I'll say that I'll side with Jalen Turner at 7,800.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Next up, we got a matchup that came together yesterday, as it was supposed to be Nick Maximov taking on Carl Roberson. Carl Roberson pulled from the event due to medical reasons, and Cody Brundage steps in. Cody was going to be on the October 5th episode of Dana White's Contender Series. I actually spoke to him about 2 weeks ago about that matchup, which initially it was him versus Nick Maximov on the Contender Series. Nick got put up to this card, and so now it all comes together. So both these guys are familiar with each other. I'm familiar with both of these guys. Cody moved his training out to Factory X about a year and a half ago with his wife, Amanda Bobby Cooper. And of course, Nick Maximov at the Nick Diaz Training Academy. Brundage has been one of the main sparring partners for Anthony Smith. So this isn't a situation where, hey, he's been in full blown training camp for the last 6 weeks here. Maximov, jiu-jitsu. That's what you're going to know him for. If you've watched any of the Submission Underground shows, he's been a part of that. For Cody Brundage, and I have seen some money coming in on Cody Brundage on the betting side of the equation, he has a wrestling base, but to me, it's about keeping this fight on the feet and not making a jiu-jitsu matchup. If this fight goes to the ground and it becomes a jiu-jitsu match, the more I like Nick Maximov.
Yeah, I think this is a better fight for Maximov. Truthfully, I think that debuting against Carl Roberson was a very difficult task, despite Carl Roberson struggling against submission artists. Roberson, was a kickboxer who would somewhat initiate takedowns and then get out grappled in certain sequences. But I do think that this matchup is a better fight for Maximov. And I think that Brundage stepping in is, I think it's fair. I think it's going to be a good fight, a good contest. People getting to Brundage, I understand it because of his takedowns. I think that he's well-rounded. I think that if he does take Maximov down, he has to be very, very careful. And I wouldn't really suggest that. I am favoring Maximov in the fight because I do like his finishing ability. I like that he has a killer instinct on the mat. I think that he'll, hunt for some heel hooks. I think that he will work towards a finish. Whereas I think that Brundage will be looking to, somewhat survive and drag this fight out into deeper water and get a dominant decision. So it's at 8,000, right? Maximov is going to be a smash play for me. Brundage, I would imagine, would come in around the mid-7 range, which will make this fight somewhat optimal. Or you would imagine, like you'd probably have to get to this fight because both fighters are so cheap. But it's Maximov for me. I like everything about him. I like the fact that he's been training with Nick Diaz through this camp. And yeah, I think we can get a finish here.
Yeah, the only thing is we haven't seen a price on DraftKings on Cody Brundage, unless something's come down here in the last hour or so. The price point is out there over on FanDuel, $12 on FanDuel, man. That's a nice little play there. But it's going to be, the one side with both these guys is they're both young fighters, and there hasn't been like that notable win on either one of their records. So I think that's something to kind of sit out there. Next up, we've got Matthew Semelsberger taking on Martin Sano. Sano, 6,800, Semelsberger, 9,400. Look, are you unchecking Sano just like you're unchecking Lauren Murphy?
I am. I think he could definitely pull it off if he can get this fight to the mat. I was looking at his Instagram and all that, and I was kind of going back and watching a lot of his fights. He's a purple belt. I thought that he would be a higher belt than that, but he is not. He is a purple belt under Nick Diaz, which is, still really, really good. But I think that Semelsberger is a very tough fighter to go against. I think that he's going to be physical in all aspects. He has great striking, good in the clinch, solid takedown defense, and that would probably be the game plan. I would imagine close distance, put Semelsberger against the cage, work towards taking him down. I just don't see it happening, man. I think that Semelsberger is appropriately priced. I think he's going to get him out of there within 2 rounds. If he doesn't get him out of there within 2 rounds, we could be looking at an elevated score because a ton of accrued stats. So I like him. I like him at 9,400. Martin Sano, don't think he's really UFC level at all. If you go back and you look at his record, you look at his fights in Bellator, you look at everything. He's here because of his friend Nick Diaz and his training partner. It's an opportunity, and I'll say that they could have paired him against a lot of easier opponents, but I think Semelsberger goes right through him.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Of course, one of the great benefits of being an Osmo Plus member, it gives you access to our premium Slack channel, because not just are you joining Osmo Plus, you're joining our DFS community, as of course we're in there during fight nights talking about what's going on, and a lot of great conversation goes on there where you can talk with other people about how are they building their lineup. So that's a great perk of being a Osmo Plus member. Now, our final fight of the card is Jonathan Pearce taking on Omar Moraes. JSP 7,700, Moraes 8,500. What's your take, Pete?
I'll say that I was trying to convince myself to get exposure to Jonathan Pearce. I will have exposure to him because he's probably the more well-rounded of the two. He has good, good hands, really good wrestling. I just really like the camp that Omar Moraes is a part of at Sanford MMA. I think that they're going to prep him pretty well for this fight. I think that his wrestling defense will get better every fight, every camp. And I think we've seen that throughout his fights. That was really on display in his previous fight against Shane Young. And I thought Shane Young, had a path to victory there by trying to take him down. And, Omar Moraes showed, that he's skilled in all areas. It's just a matter of pace. And I think Jonathan Pearce's pace is what could possibly, come through for him. So I will be getting some exposure to him down at 7,700. And I think that'll be pretty popular because if you look at box scores, you see Pearce has 68.6 fantasy points per fight, whereas Moraes is 54.1. A little lackluster, a little taking his time on the outside, picking his shots, putting together good combinations. But I'm still siding with Omar Moraes despite me putting Jonathan Pearce in my underdog pool where I will be sprinkling him.
By the way, if you have any questions, line those up right now. We'll get to that momentarily. I do want to mention something just coming in here. Nothing crazy, Pete, so don't worry. No breaking news, but Aaron Bronster tweeting saying, I asked Dana White whether there was any consideration for Dan Hooker versus Nasrat Haqparast to be held at a catchweight on Saturday due to the extenuating circumstances on both sides. He said that neither fighter had requested any additional weight allowance for the bout.
Why don't you ask him? I'm sure that would probably.
Why have the managers not asked that?
I would agree. I mean, it's not Dana White's responsibility. That's something managers should have, put out there and said, hey, we're doing a lot for the company right here. Throw us a bone.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get some fight picks here before we get into some listener questions. Let's start off the very first fight. Let's start Moraes and Pearce. I will go Omar Moraes.
Same Moraes.
Semelsberger.
Semelsberger.
Brundage and Maximov.
I'm interested to see who you go with because I believe you know both of them, but I'm going to go with Maximov.
I'm going to go Cody Brundage.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, damn. Okay, I got to increase my exposure. All right.
And plus, also, I think look, I've known Cody for a long time, but it's also back in that gym of Factory X too.
Yeah, I mean that is a good point. Very good point.
Turner and Medic. I would go Jalen Turner.
Slightly Jalen Turner.
I will take Santos against Modafferi.
Santos.
Chris Daukaus. I will go Hooker against Haqparast.
Yeah, Dan Hooker.
I will go Merab Dvalishvili over Marlon Moraes.
Oh, it doesn't feel good, but I'll go Dvalishvili.
I'll take Jessica Andrade over Calvillo.
Yeah, I love Jessica Andrade.
Don't feel good about this. Give me Curtis Blaydes.
I'm going Jairzinho Rozenstruik.
Oh,
I think he touches him.
I would not surprise me one bit. Yeah. I will go Robbie Lawler against Nick Diaz just because I don't know what to expect out of Nick Diaz.
Really? Okay. I'm going Nick Diaz.
Shevchenko.
Yeah, yep.
Who you got in the main event?
Man, I've been really torn. I'll tell you what, this card, we talked about it. I feel like I can get tugged in either direction with a lot of fighters, but I'm going to go with Volkanovski.
Give me New.
Get out
Brian
of here,
Ortega.
really? Okay.
I think Ortega. I think the additional time has been really key for this one. And I'm gonna say we got New.
I'm worried about COVID for Volkanovski, to be honest.
Yeah. Samuel, appreciate you there in the super chat with his usual questions here. So top 2 cash. So for me, my top 2 cash would be Chris Daukaus. And my second, I mean, I hate to take another high price salary.
I'm going
Shevchenko.
Yeah, I'm going Shevchenko, and then I'm going Andrade. I think that they're both going to get the victories.
In terms of GPPs.
Oh, I retract that. Instead of Andrade, I'm going to say Semelsberger.
In terms of GPPs, my number 1 target will be Moraes Dvalishvili because of the takedowns. Because if he wins, it's going to be a huge score. And, in terms of my other one, in terms of top GPP play, probably Semelsberger.
Yeah, I'll go top GPP play. Man, it's so weird. I will go with somebody in the Medic Turner fight. I think that somebody's getting knocked out.
MVP and champion. We mentioned about Chris Daukaus a little earlier. I do like that one. Moraes, if he's able to do what I think he can do, that could be a huge score out of him. Semelsberger, I think, is a good one. Maybe is Omar Moraes a sneaky MVP?
Well, he's going to have to defend takedowns. So hell yeah, on that platform, that is a phenomenal call. I just don't. You want to target somebody who's going to defend takedowns and work towards a finish. That's why I think Daukaus is the guy. But I think Omar Moraes could be a pivotal piece over on FanDuel.
Favorite inside the distance, and it's all based on his opponent, Matthew Semelsberger.
Yeah, same. I like Semelsberger a lot.
Looking at some leverage plays. So let me just kind of look here at ownership in terms of that. On the high end, I think Thalia Santos is potentially that leverage play. They're on the high end. Other leverage plays. Marlon Moraes, I think, is one to look in there because if he wins, it's by first round stoppage.
100. Yeah, you already know everybody's going to be plugging in Dvalishvili because of pace and points. So if you can be underweight to that, like let's compare him to like a Derrick Henry on the card, right? Like if Derrick Henry goes out there and doesn't have that phenomenal second half, and you're underweight, you possibly could have so much more up on the field than other fighters who are other people who are rostering Dvalishvili.
Upset of the night, I think for you, obviously you picked Rozenstruik, so that's got to be your upset of the night.
Yeah, I mean that's more of just a pick rather than DFS. I'll be getting to him, but I'm going to say Nick Diaz slightly. I mean it's a slight upset, but I'm picking Nick Diaz.
I don't know how you can trust him.
I mean, I just think
too many unknowns.
I know, but I don't trust. I mean, I guess I trust Robbie Lawler a little bit more, but
it's not the trust either one of them, no doubt.
It's also, I mean, he did beat Robbie Lawler in the first encounter, and I think that I'm still picking Nick Diaz. I'm sorry, he's going to figure it out somehow.
Upset, I will. He's a slight underdog in this one. Jalen Turner.
I like it.
Is the first fight of the night optimal?
I don't think so. I really don't. Obviously, Jonathan Pearce has a crazy ceiling if he can land takedowns, but I think it's going to be tough sledding, and I don't think Omar Moraes is going to be able to give it. I don't think he's going to give him too many opportunities. Like if Pearce lands 3 takedowns, I don't think that's going to make it an optimal score.
Samuel said the over-under on finishes at 8.
Well, we got 13 fights?
14.
Damn.
I'm just trying to count. I'm counting down how many I think are good likelihoods.
I'm going to say under. I think it's going to be a decision week.
I'll say under too.
Okay.
Now, if you said number 7, then I think that becomes an interesting number.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah, I think you should set a 7.5. That should be the number.
I think Sam's starting to learn what's a good line and what's a bad line. So,
let's see here. Nick says Lawler going to gas and get stocked and slapped.
Yeah, I think he's
I
going to get
believe,
slapped.
if I recall correctly, this is the back to fight in 2004 when Nick Diaz came into the cage and said, Stockton.
Yeah.
And just yelled it at him.
Whatever, man. I don't know with him or Nate. They're both wild cards. You'd never know what you're going to get from them. But
What would be the city people would yell out in Connecticut to you?
probably Hartford. No, or New Britain or New Haven. I don't know. We have like 3 terrible cities in Connecticut that are like somewhat murder capitals. So I don't know. Any of those, I guess.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, look, there is something. I mean, even though we haven't seen Nick in a long time, I mean, look, he's a guy that's going to be fascinating to see. Someone else earlier in the chat said, hey, is there a line out there of whether Nick will show up on fight night?
Oh, man, I know that there's such wild cards. I mean, you see he kind of goes and creates his own rules and says, I'm feeling that it's going to be at 185. Like what other fighter does that to Dana White? I don't think anybody.
There's not many that have that kind of leverage.
I think it would be like Connor, the Diaz guys, and that's about it, really. Anybody else does that, I think they provide a lot of pushback to him.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Masvidal, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, so that's going to do it for this edition of the Also MMA Strategy Show. Of course, as you leave the show here, give us a thumbs up there on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. That helps us out a lot as well. Of course, I will not be here on Saturday. I will be out in LA for Bucks and Rams. But Pete will be here on Saturday afternoon to get you ready for UFC 266. Who knows? Maybe I'll just slide into that. I'll pop up my phone, just start trolling Pete in the YouTube section.
That's all right. That's all right, buddy. Yeah, no, I can't wait for the show. I'm excited and excited for these fights. And yeah, man, thanks for checking us out today, guys. And before you leave, hit that like button. We appreciate you a lot.
And if you're watching this after the fact, you want to leave a comment on the show, leave it in the comment section. Myself and Pete, we will get back to you as the show ends. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Awesome MMA Strategy Show. I will talk to you next week on the Strategy Show. Pete will talk to you on Saturday for Live Before Lock. Hope everyone has a good day. And love to see those screenshots on Saturday night with your wins for UFC 266. Have a good day, everybody.